the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the first official episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. So excited to get things rolling under this new flag. And I'm joined today by my long-standing co-host, Pastor Matt Wozbinski. How's it going, Matt?
Going pretty good. We had a quick little conversation, and I would like to just kind of call dibs on the fact that I am a co-host. I know that there's going to be so many things that Ministry Hackers is doing, and I'm going to just be like a little thing here and there, but I just want to call dibs on the co-host seat. Everyone else is just a guest or a friend of the podcast.
Right.
So just throwing that out there. But
Just
I'm
to
doing
clarify.
well. Yes, just wanted to say episode 1, just like letting everyone know where everything stands. So then, once we get all big time and all these big names are coming in, they just know where they stand. So
Well, I think Andy Stanley, he says, the only reason he's the pastor of North Point is because he was there first.
yeah.
And so that's really where you're at. You
Well,
are
and
the
literally,
co-host because you were here first.
I make that joke all the time because like there are certain people, not to like toot your own horn, Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, but people are like, wow, like Party Cooper hangs out with you a lot. And I'm like, honestly, I just bugged him like constantly for a long time, and eventually it just stuck. So
Yeah, I couldn't get rid of you. So
exactly, that's my leadership principle, is just follow and bug people who you want to emulate, and eventually you'll just get stuck with them. So
right. All right, so let's just do a little recap for those who are new to the episode, or maybe you are joining us for the first time in several weeks or the last few months, and you're wondering what in the world happened. What happened to Mind the Gap, and how did Ministry Hackers get here? So just a little recap. So we started Mind the Gap last February, and the intention of Mind the Gap was to, it was really to help pastors and ministry leaders to fill in the gaps of their training. All of us have different levels of training and experiences of training. Some of us went to Bible college, and some of us came up through our churches or whatever. But regardless of what training we've had, all of us had gaps. And so, the idea behind Mind the Gap was we were going to try and fill those gaps. Me and Pastor Matt, we were going to fill those gaps for everybody, and just to resource, tools and things that would help that. And then COVID happened, and the world got turned upside down, and church was a whole new experience. And so in June, we kind of felt like Mind the Gap had ran its course, mainly because we were all off the map. There were all kinds of gaps for all of us, and it wasn't really even about training anymore. It was more about we were adapting to the world around us. And so, all of us were learning on the fly. So we just felt like Mind the Gap didn't fit, and it didn't meet the need that we, had intended, just because the needs had changed. And so on August 10th, just a few weeks ago, we had our final Mind the Gap episode, and today we're raising the flag on Ministry Hackers. And so our goal now in this community is really to build a community of pastors and ministry leaders who are finding innovative solutions to ministry, who are encouraging one another in these trying times, and who are focused on the mission of Jesus. There are a lot of things distracting us as pastors right now, and we want a community that's focused on the mission, that's keeping that at the forefront. And so that's kind of who we are. That's what we're doing. That's what this podcast is going to be all about. If you want to join the Ministry Hackers group, the community, you can do that by either going to ministryhackers.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Ministry Hackers, and just join the community and be a part of the conversation. So it's been a couple weeks for you, Matt, since we lowered the flag on Mind the Gap. How are you feeling about the change at this point?
pretty good. I think that like COVID, like it has with many things, kind of just changed a lot of stuff. And so I think that the kind of parallel that I've been drawing up in my brain is we were really trying to teach people how to fly a plane, and then all of a sudden, like, one of our engines blew up. So at that point, knowing how to fly the plane does not matter. It's how can you piece together what is happening and work together. Hey, this is working well, this is not working well, and kind of coming alongside to support each other. And I think that has become much more vital, just because whether it's online services or getting people engaged through a computer screen, or do you open in-person services, do you not? All these are questions that we really haven't had to answer before, whether or not you have been in ministry for 20 years or 2 weeks.
Right.
So I think that so much value is going to come out of Ministry Hackers, and just the concept of, hey, here's something that we're trying, encouraging each other, and just making what works to benefit the overall kingdom of God, not just our individual church buildings. So I'm really excited about it.
Good. Yeah, me too. Me too. And we've gotten some pretty good feedback, even in the group. We're having some good interactions, and so yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. We're gonna look at bringing in some guests. We did Mind the Gap. Every 2 weeks was our schedule, and we're gonna increase that with some more guests and some more episodes and more tools and tips and resources and all those things. And so, yeah, the idea behind Ministry Hackers is just more of all of that. And so, because we really, pastors are in a very unique situation right now. And so what we want to do is we want to do everything we can to get whatever tools, whatever resources, and quite honestly, even whatever encouragement you need, because I feel like pastors are almost in an impossible situation at this point. It doesn't matter which side of the situation you land on. You get blasted from all sides, and so
Yeah.
it may be one of the loneliest times for pastors ever, because there really is not a lot of wins that we can find on our own. And so
Mm-hmm.
at least the group, hopefully for everybody that's in there, it will be encouraging and challenging and even collaborative, where we can come up with some answers to our challenges together. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so one of the big questions that we are all asking and trying to navigate through is how do we engage people online? And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Regardless of your opinion on digital church, there's a lot of different perspectives on digital church, but most pastors will at least acknowledge the value in reaching people through social media, having some sort of online presence to engage people. But many are at a loss on how to practically carry out an engaging experience online. And so, Matt, I feel like this is something that your church has done over the last several months very well. So for you, in what you guys did you ramp up your strategy from what you were already doing pre-COVID, or were did you guys have to figure out a strategy once COVID hit?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a blend of both. I think that we were doing well in a pre-COVID world of social media, as far as we would post our messages on YouTube on like Tuesday of next week. We would maybe post a clip of a sermon on Facebook, maybe once every other week, doing the typical, like, oh, wow, very social media savvy church pre-COVID, where
Right.
that was pretty much a lot that you had to do to kind of just meet the very minimal demand, because you had the big gun of a Sunday experience. But once that kind of went out the window, you had to kind of pump in some steroids into your social media. And
Right.
so we went from our original game plan, if COVID did not exist, was we were planning on starting live streaming services this fall. And so we had already started having those conversations about what does that look like, what gear do we need, all this sort of stuff. But basically within a week, this was back in March, we had to say, okay, well, we're going to have to start doing this now. And
Right.
a lot of trial and error, a lot of, okay, do we just stream on Facebook Live? Do we pre-record? Do we do a live stream? And I feel like that's something that a lot of churches have had to kind of navigate what fits best for them. But there's also a lot of things that we knew that we didn't want to sacrifice. One of the big things was the community side. So we started using something called Chop, which is a church online platform, which I believe that, is it Life Church is the one who uses it.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so uh, we started using that. And one of the great things about that service is that you're able to pray with people online. You're able to chat with people online during the service. And then also directing everyone from our social media and trying to even point them where to go. We had multiple Facebook pages. We have 7 campuses. And so we made the decision to, instead of having one big page, to actually launch 7 pages for each campus. Then we had to decide, okay, do we stream from one and share it on all the others, or do we share on each one? Do we have a moderator on each page? So just to encourage you a little bit, we're a substantial, as far as size goes, church. And we were kind of making it up as we went, which once again kind of points to the importance of ministry hackers versus mind the gap, is because I think that a lot of times people can say, man, if we had the resources and if we had the team and if we had the staff to pull that off, then of course we could do that. But I'm letting you know that even sometimes you can have the team and have the staff and have, the desire to do it. And sometimes you're just putting it together with like super glue and spit. So, but yeah, so I think that we were doing a good job, but I think like most churches, we also had to figure out, how do we keep what we want to keep, whether that's serving our community, whether that's sharing the gospel, whether that's baptizing people. How do we keep that going in a completely digital world? And that's an experience that, we're still adapting to, but trying to get better at.
Right. Man, that's good. So that's what we're going to try and talk through in this episode, and what we're going to do is we're going to pull a page from the secret blueprint for an engaging church. So for those who are unfamiliar with what that is, the secret blueprint is a little cheat sheet for the 9 experiences that every person in your church goes through. Every person that walks in your door, they go through 9 different experiences. And what the secret blueprint does is it gives you tips on how to skyrocket your engagement in all 9 of those experiences. And so you can get a copy of the blueprint for free at engagingchurchblueprint.com/list. That's engagingchurchblueprint.com/list. And the first experience in the blueprint is the engaging experience. And so the goal of the engaging experience is to bring people from the community into your sanctuary. So how do you get the people in your community, your schools, your favorite coffee house? How do you get those people to walk through the doors of your church? That's the goal of the engaging experience. And so, the best assets for most churches is your Sunday morning sanctuary experience and your people. Those are your 2 best assets. Well, the challenge is if people, if we don't have a good engaging experience. And so for most churches, the engaging experience is maybe haphazard. The social media, strategy is a little, dysfunctional, or maybe it just doesn't exist. Then you never get a chance to show off your best assets, your Sunday morning sanctuary experience or your people, because then, people from the community never walk through the doors to see all that you have to offer. And so you have to have a good engaging experience in order to show off your best assets. Would you agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the comparison would be, not that we want to bleed too much of church and business, but let's say that you have the best food at this diner, but you don't do any sort of advertising and no one knows that you are even open, or how to get to your location, or what kind of food you serve. Then you're not going to get any customers. You can have the best food and the most kind waiters, and it could be Chick-fil-A and you get like great drive-through experience and, everything's my pleasure. But if nobody knows who you are and what you're about and where to find you and all this sort of stuff, then all that stuff is kind of pointless at that point. And so the same thing goes for your church. Social media and your online presence is the new front door. It's basically what everyone looks at. I worked at a church in the past and we were looking at doing a website redesign. And I think that we had to pay a couple of $1,000s for our URL. And it was like this big decision. But we also looked up statistics that show, I don't know exactly what the number is, but I want to say it's somewhere in the ballpark of 70% of people will Google your church before they even attend it. And so, it used to be, oh, you would drive by, you would see the sign out front, and then you would come and check it out. Now people will drive by, see the sign out front, and then pull out their smartphone and look you up on Facebook or on
Right.
Instagram or online. And so for us, getting that URL was the same as putting out a brand new like LED sign in front of the building,
Hmm.
because it made it easy for people to find us. So
Right.
there's value in that. So yeah, so you could have the best things once you actually walk in. You can have the best team, the best volunteers, the best service, the best worship, all these sort of things. But if people can't experience that before they walk in the door, then they probably won't ever walk in the door.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly it. And so, and again, most of us are not social media gurus or online presence gurus, and so, it's easy for us to kind of stumble through and really struggle. And quite honestly, for me, it was easy to get frustrated trying to figure out how to create a good online social media presence and how to create an engaging experience. And since COVID hit, that's become even more of a need because you can't just kind of have something online. It, that may be the only thing you have right now, because maybe you're not having live services, and so you're having to figure out how to draw people in. And so we just want to give just a few practical tips in this episode to kind of help take the mystery out of the practical side of putting together a good engagement experience. And so the first thing is you want to make people familiar with your church before they ever visit. You know, kind of like you were saying, Matt, when people decide to come to your church, most of the time they're not coming unfamiliar. They're
Mm-hmm.
coming with some sort of understanding. Now, if you have a rough website, or if you have no social media presence, then either they're coming with very little understanding, which probably means that most of them are not even choosing to come because they don't know enough.
Mm-hmm.
People want to feel familiar with your church before they ever walk through the doors. And so what our goal is to make them as familiar as possible with us, so that when they walk into our services in a live sanctuary setting, they almost feel like they know what's going on. They maybe even know some people already, just because of the engagement. And so, the first thing that you want to do, and one strategy you can use to do this, is to establish partnerships with local businesses in the area. And so I'm not talking about the church down the street. What I'm talking about is maybe your local coffee house, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe your I'm trying to think of what other local businesses you could use, with local restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
just different partnerships, especially ones who line up with maybe some initiatives or some goals that you have as a church, because then you can work together and you can promote each other's events, you can promote each other's social media posts, things like that. But creating partnerships with local businesses so that it's not just you and your staff and your congregation getting your message out. With partnerships, then you're putting out someone else's message while they're putting out yours. Do you guys do any of that, Matt?
Absolutely. So one thing that kind of popped into my brain when you were talking about that was we a couple months back had some really terrible flooding that happened, and so one of the things that our church did was we did this called a caravan of hope. And so what we did was it was a couple days after the flooding. People were just kind of gutting out their basements and taking things to the curb, and luckily our community stepped up in a big way. So a lot of the practical needs were met as far as supplies and relief and all that. And so what we did was we partnered with two local businesses. One was like a barbecue food truck, and one was Kona Ice, so like a shaved ice truck. And what we did was we paid like X amount, and they gave us basically at cost what it was going to take. And then we went through these affected neighborhoods, and people were, out working and trying to clean up their house and do all that. And we basically drove through these neighborhoods and said, hey, it's completely free. Take a break, take 10 minutes off. We've been working for the past couple of days. Get some shaved ice, get some food. And that has opened up some great experiences. Because one, we didn't necessarily, if some people ask, we would say, yeah, at this point, we're still meeting in person. but it was, yeah, we are meeting at this location. We'd love for you to come out. But that was almost like a secondary thing. But people were seeing that a local church that, didn't care whether or not you came or you attended, was there just to kind of help them out. And so there was that. And then also that made great partnerships with those food trucks. And we've worked with them in other events since then. So yeah, that's definitely something that you really want, is creating those local partnerships. And then also, that's a great example. So then let's say 3 months from now, someone invites them to 242, they might still have that memory of, oh yeah, I remember when we were hit with the flood, they came through and they, gave me a hot dog. And so, yeah, so the more that you can do those, there's more connections that you can have, the better kind of visual that people will have of your church before they even walk in the door.
Right. Well, and the other thing that it is, it also gives kind of almost like a passive endorsement. And so, when they see your church partnered with Kona Ice may not be saying, hey, go to this church. But what people are seeing is that, Kona Ice is choosing to partner with your church.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of gives a passive endorsement to you and to your community. And so it creates a little bit of a familiarity and even a comfort.
Yeah.
Because not only are they seeing you out there, because the impact would be different if you were showing up all by yourselves, just your church, handing
Absolutely.
out Kona Ice.
Mhm.
But the fact that Kona Ice is right there with you, their truck is traveling alongside of you, it just endorses you in a passive way and makes you more familiar and makes people more comfortable with your church, just by doing that. And so, again, creating some sort of, partnership with local businesses not only increases your exposure and your traffic and all those things, but it also increases just people's comfort level with you. So when when your local coffee house promotes an event that you're having because they're going to be there serving coffee at it, it just creates I go to that coffee house and they're going to be at that church. So maybe, I'm going to
That
check out
church
that
isn't too
church.
bad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah. And to your second point about creating content that serves, I really think that, especially with COVID, so we have decided to go back to in-person services, limited, mask required, all these sort of things. But one of the things that we did was each campus made a video that walked you through the entire process of what church would look like.
yep.
So when you walk in, here's hand sanitizer, here's a mask if you don't have one. This is how we're doing communion that keeps it socially distanced. This is how the rows are set up. So then you are at least 6 feet away from other people and families. This is how our kids ministry is running, all these sort of things. And once again, with COVID and there just being so much gray area currently,
Right.
I would really encourage you, if you are going back to in-person services, to even do something like that. Even if you shoot it on your cell phone and put that on your Facebook page,
Yeah.
so then people know what they're walking into, because there is so much gray area. They might not know, okay, do I have to wear a mask? If I choose to wear a mask, am I going to show up and nobody else is wearing a mask?
Right.
Am I going to not be allowed because I don't have a mask? So there's just so many options now that even that sort of information, when you're talking about serving them and they're familiar with your church, that might even just be your cleaning procedures, or if you're having a kids program or whatever that might be, before they even show up. So then they're not in this awkward situation of they brought their kids and there isn't any kids church because of social distancing.
Right.
Just different things like that. So the more that they can know before they even walk in, the better.
Yep, exactly. Well, you make a good point. So, the idea is that a lot of times we use social media and our online presence to promote things,
Mhm.
which then really just becomes, we're just another voice in the marketing, you know, cacophony of
Mhm.
noise. But then at the same time, we also feel this need that it has to be such high quality, because it's like we're putting on a commercial, or, we're promoting something. So it has to be really good so that people will come.
Mhm.
When our focus is more on creating content that serves, well, the need for it to be this great high quality content or high quality production is not there, because what we're doing is we're actually creating content that's serving people.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, just a quick iPhone, because again, like you mentioned earlier, part of the issue is always, well, we don't have the budget for that.
Mhm.
Well, when you're creating content that serves, it's not about the budget, it's about the quality content.
Yeah.
And and if you're truly giving content that serves and that's engaging people and that people are enjoying and they feel like it's helpful, and all of those things, where they're going to keep coming back for it. And again, the idea here at this step is to make them familiar with your church before they ever visit.
Hmm.
Well, when you create content that serves rather than promotes, then you're making them familiar by adding value to their everyday life. And so it kind of builds that relationship in just a different way.
Hmm.
And so yeah.
Absolutely.
And as pastors and ministry leaders, we have tons of content,
Hmm.
but most of the people that hear it are just inside our church. If
Hmm.
we just you know repackage it and get it out there to the world, even if they never walk through our door, we're still ministering, we're still engaging, and we're still creating change in their life. And so to me,
Absolutely.
it's just a win-win all around. So
Yep.
then once they're familiar with your church before they've come and visit, the next thing you need to do is create engagement. So establish engagement. Now, if you're putting out content and you're creating stuff that people are wanting to engage with, most likely and hopefully maybe they are commenting or they're liking or sharing or whatever the case is. The worst thing you can do is completely ignore all of that activity.
Hmm.
You put your content out there and they engage back with you and you're silent. You have to reply. You have to do something to engage them. Sometimes I think of it like, you know, you're the one that says I love you, and there is no response from the other side. And so that's just not what you're wanting to, that's not the experience you're wanting to give people.
Yeah, and I have a very practical way that this works. So this last week, because we have started doing in-person services, but we still have strict guidelines for social distancing, we have a very limited kids service. So they are only allowed to take a certain amount, and you have to register your kid ahead of time. And so my wife had tagged someone who was planning on attending the service, and on Facebook, because someone posted like a picture of them getting ready for kids service and setting up. And they had replied, "Hey, would love to, but all the spots are filled." In that moment, we were able to then send that message, like kind of screenshot that to someone who we knew was coming but wasn't serving that week. Said, "Hey, we have a family that would love to come, but they can't because we don't have enough volunteers and space and all that." And then we were able to ask someone, "Hey, here's a tangible need. Um, are you able to serve?" They said yes. And then we were able to reply to that on Facebook and say, "Hey, we were able to find one more person. We were able to open up more slots. You and your kids are more than welcome to come."
Nice.
So the options there were to just kind of let that flow. Like if we just posted the picture of, "Hey, getting ready for kids service," and then didn't check it until the next day, then we would have completely missed that interaction.
Yep.
And I think that the value of people saying, "Oh, wow, you care about my kids enough to where you're kind of willing to move things and change things and empower some things to make it so my kids can come to church," I think that speaks a lot to people. And
Mhm.
so that's just so much better. Another thing, and this is just a little tidbit, is we're doing in-person services, but we're still doing online services where we're streaming online. One really helpful thing that we've seen is you might have some core volunteers who are incredibly dedicated. Like we have a woman who leads one of our teams. She does all of our scheduling, but she works in the medical community. So she just does not feel comfortable coming back to a large group setting, which is totally fine. But she watches the services. So what we have done is we have made her an admin on our Facebook page. And
Mhm.
so she goes through and she interacts with people who are watching online. She'll like their comments, she'll reply to them, she'll do all that. So then she can still serve even though she's not actually attending in person.
Yeah.
So that's a nice little in between. Maybe if you are you have some people who are bought into the vision of what your church is doing but cannot attend an in-person service, maybe have them kind of be in charge of that social media where it's kind of their job. They have the notifications turned on if people are commenting or doing things on your post, and they can reach out and maybe pray for people or support people, even if they're not attending the in-person services.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I like the point too that you're making about doing it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Having that social media awareness in real time, especially on service times, things like that, where the need is, pretty quick. You're able to capture that in the moment, respond quickly, and get them there. And so, yeah, it's definitely important. The other part of establishing engagement is using email sequences and using them strategically. So, I don't know, not many churches, I think, use email sequences a ton.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when we're doing social media engagement and different things online, even when we're talking about creating content that serves, some of that content, you could create it to where, they give you their email and you send them something. So whether it's a PDF or whether it's a little booklet or, some sort of digital something that will help them. Well, when you get that email, then it allows you then to follow up. Because the one challenge with social media is, you may get a lot of interactions, but it's hard to target that information to that one person or that couple people, um, you know, with ease. Whereas with an email, especially if you're creating your email lists and you're capturing those, you can create a sequence of emails that go out at different points that kind of walk people through another level of experience. And so, let's say you capture an email through, let's say you provided a 10 steps that every young family needs to take to be financially stable or something like that, and that in the next 6 months you're going to do financial peace.
Mm-hmm.
So once they come on your website or go through your social media and they choose to get that PDF of those helpful tips, you then take that and you put that into an email sequence that then triggers when financial peace is coming up. Hey, just want to let you know the financial piece is coming up and we'd love to have you there. And, you have 3 or 4 emails that go out periodically in the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to it. You're engaging them. It's not just, some social media post 6 months ago and then, hey, by the way, we have this thing coming up, but you're slowly walking them through an online relationship into something that's going to serve them and help them and get them through your doors and into your community. And so, do you guys use email sequences at all?
Yeah, so we use a lot of process cues, and one of the really nice things about that is, like you said, it's much better than just the shotgun method of, hey, here's our monthly newsletter and everything that's going on. Because a lot of times people might experience things. They might come to an event that you threw. They might be a part of a serve project that you are involved in. And so if you are sending them information that's not really pertinent to them, then they're more likely just to tune out. But if you're strategic with those, like you said, someone is coming for a financial need, and then there's an opportunity for them to grow financially. Those go hand in hand. Somebody gives you their email because you're doing a serve where you're giving out back to school supplies, and they give you your email. And then later, like down the road, you're doing some sort of outreach at the park for kids ministry. Then those two go hand in hand.
Yep.
And so someone's coming to serve, and then you're giving them something about, hey, we're looking for people for the worship team. Now you might hit somebody who happens to have a kid and wants to be on the worship team. But if you're just constantly giving them stuff that doesn't really apply to them, then the more likely they are to just ignore it or unsubscribe.
Right.
But if you're being strategic with that, like I said, they signed up for something that's specifically kids related, and then, hey, we would love for you to join us in this other kids related field, then that makes it a lot more likely that they're going to engage in that other activity.
Right. Yep, exactly. So once you've established engagement, again, the idea is they come and they walk through your doors. Now, this third one, I feel sad for you a little bit on this one, Matt, because one of the casualties of COVID was your trip to Disney. Is that right?
Yes. So for those who are listening to the audio podcast, you can't see this, but I'm literally at my desk, have a Be Our Guest book, which is kind of like a first impressions Bible that talks about how Disney just knocks it out of the park when it comes to first impressions and guest services. And yeah, we were going to go in November, and the plan is we're like college football. The plan is this spring, and we'll see how it goes. And so, but yeah, I've been to Disney once when I was like 14, and then my kids and my wife have never been to Disney. And so we were saving up. We had our reservations, and then good old COVID. So, but yeah, and part of it is we really want to go, but with the masks, and then a lot of the stuff is the character stuff, because our kids are 1-year-old and 2-year-old, so they don't really care about the rides and all that. They just want to see like Cinderella and stuff. And so we're kind of waiting and hoping for that to relax a little bit. But yes, so this one kind of hurts a little bit, but carry on.
So when somebody comes through your doors, you want them to be your guests. And one of the best places that does this is Disney, because, they think through every possible situation and they have an answer for everything that could possibly happen. But when people walk through the doors of our churches, most of the time we have ushers, we have greeters, and we have people in place, but how well are they trained? And so one of the biggest things that we need to do in all of our locations to increase engagement for people who walk through the doors is to train our teams for readiness for whatever situations that may arise, whether it's conflict, whether it's challenge, whatever that may be, but training our teams for that readiness and making sure that they have all the resources they need, all the tools they need, and everything necessary to create an experience that every guest will remember, will talk about, and will come back for more. And so now this is your world, Matt, because this is what you do. So what do you guys do to train your team for readiness?
So there's a few things. So one thing that's super easy for you to implement, like even this week, is we do something called Team Huddle every single Sunday. And so our service starts at 11 o'clock, and at 10:15, regardless of what you do, if your job is to count the offering, if your job is to greet someone at the door, if your job is safety and security, if your job is a kids ministry worker, a youth worker, worship team, whatever it is, we gather together, and it's just a quick 5 to 10 minute meeting, and we talk about what's going on in that service. So we might say, hey, it's a pretty regular week. Just so you know, this is the kind of, we call them encounter or altar time that we're doing. If maybe we're asking people to come forward, or we're challenging people to like take something at the door. And so we need our ushers to be at the doors when service ends. Maybe there's something in the lobby that's different. We're doing some sort of, we've done like an at the movies thing where we're handing out popcorn and doing things like that. And so we want everybody to kind of know the like nuances of what's happening during the week, and what's different about that service. We talk about that. We take some quick prayer requests, and then we kind of come together and we do a whole Chicago Bulls, what time is it? Church time, hands all in the middle kind of thing. So that's something that you can start right away. Like I said, we do it at 10:15. We ask for everyone to be at their stations by 10:30, and church is at 11. So what that does is, whether you are somebody who is on the worship team, or you are on the parking team, or you are helping serve communion, you know what's going on during that service. So then if something comes up, or if all of a sudden someone has a question, you are equipped to answer that question, at least on a very base level. Right. Or you know who is the point person for if something weird is going on. Like, hey, we're doing this big inflatable thing in the parking lot. Amy is the one who's in charge of that. And so if anyone has any questions, just make sure that you're pointing them to her. So everyone is kind of on that same page, even if it's not necessarily your area. And I think that's something where, you want to be very specialized and people be good at what they're good at. But then at the same time, you want everyone to have a general idea of what's going on. Everyone should know what happens if a new person is coming in for the first time. Everyone should know where to check in your kids and what the process is with that. Everyone should be able to explain the order of service, and okay, well, we're going to have about 15 minutes of worship followed by a message. Everyone should know, hey, am I allowed to take communion? Very basic things that a first-time attender might not know and might just ask the closest person with a name tag. And so the more that you're kind of instilling that into your leaders, even on a weekly basis, the better. So And I know Disney does a great job of this too. If you are asking someone who's selling snow cones or you're asking someone who's a guest services, most likely they can probably answer most of your questions because they know what's going on. They know when the parades are, they know where the different attractions are, they know reasons why something is shut down or why something can't be accessed. And so your church should be the same. If someone pulls into the parking lot and waves down a parking person and says, hey, are you guys having kid services? The parking person shouldn't say, I don't know, but I know you park there. Like, they should know all this information,
Right.
even if it's on a very base level.
Right.
And so having that team huddle just for 5 minutes really kind of empowers them to at least know the base level of what they need to know for that week.
Right. Well, and one of the things I learned when I was working front desk at a hotel, they told us all the time, you never say, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You always have a better answer than that. And I think the same is true, for our churches. When people come to our church, they walk in, they're the guest. They don't know anything
Mm-hmm.
usually. And so when they walk up to a greeter or an usher or somebody who looks like, they at least belong there,
Mm-hmm.
and they ask a question and the response is, I don't know, it just leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And so
Mm-hmm.
being able to, uh, you know, train your people to have the answers, at least, like you said, at least point to somebody that has the answers, and the response can be, let me find out for you,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And so, because the idea is that we're not just doing a service,
Mm-hmm.
they're not just coming to be a part of a service. What we want to do is we want to create an experience.
Mm-hmm.
We want to create an experience that they're going to remember when they walk in the doors and they sit there and they go through the service and they walk out. We want them to say, whoa, that was so good. I encountered God. I felt like I, engaged with people. People were nice to me. They shook my hand. I can't wait till next Sunday to go back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and even when we're talking about our online services, same thing. It's easy to kind of think, oh, I'm just clicking on, the computer and I'm starting the service and I'm just sitting back. But how are we engaging them? How are we drawing them in? And, when the service is over, they're like, man, that was the best online experience I've ever had at a church. What are
Mm-hmm.
we doing to create an experience rather than just a service? And so,
Yeah. And to the experience side, that's actually something that we've just adjusted to. So, like I said, before COVID, we would record our services on Thursdays and then play them on Sundays, which is fine for 99% of the time. Every so often, you'd hear so this evening instead of this morning, or, something like that would kind of slip by. But we have recently switched to live streaming. And one thing that we've really encouraged our teaching pastors to do is to incorporate people from different campuses. So say, oh, I know you guys in Saginaw are blah, 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 blah.
right.
Maybe make a reference to some sort of, local event that's happening. It reminds me a lot of, you see this a lot with stand-up comedians or musicians where they're like, what up, Boston? Best city in the world? Like that sort of thing. And they say that in every single city they
Right.
go to. But we've gotten a lot of feedback saying like that makes a tangible difference.
Yep.
So even if that's online, even if you're telling people, hey, like, no, literally raise your hand if this is you, like, or hey, in the chat, say that's me, or whatever, like, know what I mean?
Yep.
Even the more that you can have those engaging experiences versus they're just watching a movie that happens to be about God, the better. And so the more that you can have that interactive experience sort of a feel, then the more likely people will stay engaged and want to come back again the next week.
Yep. Exactly. So the final thing that we want to do, that we want to encourage you to do, is to capture the moment. It's great when people walk through the door. It's great when they come and sit in their service. But quite honestly, if they come in and they walk out and you have no record of who they are, you have no idea that they were even there, it's a missed opportunity. And so there's two very tangible ways that you can capture the moment. For them, for the guest, you capture the moment by giving them a gift. And then for you as the church, you capture the moment by gathering their information. And usually these things go hand in hand. They hand you their information, you hand them a gift. And ideally, you're giving something other than a coffee mug.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, you're giving them a gift that they want. A gift, we started doing this 5 or 6 years ago now. And what we started asking the question is okay, in our community, what are people into? What do they enjoy? And one of the things we came up with was we have a lot of, so in our area we have tons and tons and tons of trails,
Mhm.
tons of walking, hiking, tons of bike paths, tons of that. And so what we decided is we were going to do good water bottles. That was
Mhm.
what we were going to give away as our one of our, I think it was our second gift in our sequence of 3. And so we were going to give away a good water bottle that had our logo on it. And that's what you want to do. You want to give good gifts that people want to have, they want to keep, and they want to use once they get it. Not something they're like, oh, that's cool. And either they toss it or they add it to their collection of 50 other mugs that they got
Mhm.
from all the other churches they visited. And so, and when you do that, again, you give them something quality that they like, and you get their information. Ideally, it's email, uh, phone number, address, and names are the primary ones. Especially if they have kids, if you can capture some sort of information for the kids, that your kids pastor or kids ministry can follow up on. But
Mhm.
giving gifts and gathering information, huge, huge, huge part of the process.
Yeah, that always drives me nuts because that's a big part of my job. And it always drives me bananas when I see a new person and then I get the Connect cards and they didn't fill one out.
Right.
Because, like you said, that's a missed opportunity. You can do so much with an email or a phone number. Not that you want to be a salesperson, but even if it's, hey, so glad you came, let's try to grab coffee this week.
Yep.
You can't do that if you don't have their phone number. You can't do that if you don't have their email. So I would put, once again, I know a lot of this comes down to, well, we just don't have the money. This is something I feel like is worth an investment, just because you that's literally square one. Like if you don't know their name and their phone number or their email address, then there's no way that you can reach out and minister to them, unless
Right.
they just happen to come back. So I would put a lot of stock and a lot of investment
Yep.
into making sure that that's something that is at least something, okay, it's worth the 5 minutes and me giving out a little bit of my personal information, and also the ease of how you do it. So
Yes.
with COVID, we actually just switched. We were planning on doing this, but once again, COVID kind of pushed us ahead a little bit faster than we wanted to. But we switched completely to digital Connect cards. And
Mm-hmm.
so now, one thing that we realized, I didn't know this until COVID, but you used to have to, with QR codes, have to have like an app to scan them.
Yep.
But now, if you just open up your regular camera,
Yep.
it's built into the software of most iPhones and smartphones.
Yep.
So you can literally just throw something on the screen and say, hey, just go ahead and pull out your camera on your phone, and they just hold it up and it will automatically take them right to a Connect card. And they can fill it out in their seat, and submit it without having to turn it in or do anything like that.
Right.
And then you say, hey, come, and maybe there's a confirmation screen or something like that. Stop by the Next Step table. We would love to give you a gift.
Yeah.
Following the service. So then you have their information and then they can come and get their gift.
Right.
But yeah, the ease of, they don't need to fill out a novel. They don't need
No.
to, you don't need to get every piece of information the first time that they're there. But like you said, if you can get those few key things, then that's a gold mine.
Well, and honestly, if you even want to streamline it even more, if you can get their name and their email, because going back to our conversation about email sequences,
Mm-hmm.
if you can get their name and email, then you can send them an email sequence gathering that information later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because a lot of times, usually it's they're walking out of service. And so they just sat through service, they're walking out, maybe they're gathering their kids, they have all this stuff, they don't want to have to fill out a whole book
Mm-hmm.
of information. But if you get their name and their email, well, then you can follow up with a sequence down the road to where they have more time. They can sit at their computer, they can fill it out real quick. And so, again, just thinking if it's an experience for them, how do you make that experience as simple and painless as possible?
Mm-hmm.
And going back to your comment about the budget, quite honestly, we spend a lot of money on events,
Mm-hmm.
and events are usually a pretty low percentage of success as far as getting people into the church. Usually it's less than 10% of the people from the community that attend events actually come and become regular attenders.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, we spend tons of money on those, but then when we do a guest process or guest gifts, we spend pennies on that. But the reality is these are people who are already choosing to walk through the door. It's
Mhm.
not this shotgun approach of all these random people who are coming to an event and have no intention of ever coming to your church. These are people who have got up early in the morning, got dressed, wrangled their kids, and came to your church.
Mhm.
I would say investing money into something nice to get them to come again is way more, has a way higher return than a giant event that you're probably going to get less than 10% of those people come to the church, let alone stay at your church. And
For
so
sure.
it's really just a matter of shifting how you see the way you use, the budget and how you engage people. So that wraps it up. Matt, what are your final thoughts on this?
Um, Once again, you kind of said a lot of this is my world. And I, obviously we want powerful services. We want incredible worship times where people are encountering God. But my job is to realize that people will have so many opportunities to be distracted, to be put off, to be confused before they even hear the gospel. And my job is to eliminate as much as possible of that. I want it to be like, this sounds weird, but like, I don't want someone having to be worried about holding it because they have to go to the bathroom, but they couldn't find where the bathroom was. And so they're distracted during the entire message because they have to go to the bathroom, but they don't know where it is.
Right.
Like, and so like something as simple as that, like good signage so people know where the bathroom is. Or someone has their kid in service because they didn't know that we have a kids program because they didn't know where to check in their kid.
Yeah.
And then so now they're entertaining their kid and their kid's distracted because it's not a proper like place for them to experience God. So all these sort of things, like the more that I can eliminate those distractions with things that don't feel super spiritual, you know what I mean? Like it's not a gospel presentation, it's not a worship time, it's parking lot, it's signage, it's things like that, it's social media things. But the more comfortable people feel when they walk into your church, the more that the Holy Spirit is going to be able to speak into their lives with very minimal distraction because they feel comfortable and they feel at peace with what's going on because they feel like, okay, well, I know the drill because I checked them out online. Someone helped me check in my kids. I know what to expect in the service, so I'm not about to be blindsided by some weird thing that I wasn't expecting. And then they're able to just completely absorb what God has for them that day. So, a lot of times we put a lot of effort into those, awesome spiritual things like the message, like worship. But once again, if we're kind of doing a rough job leading up to that, then they might be too distracted or might not even come because of all the stuff that happened prior to that. So
Right.
that's kind of
Yep.
my thoughts.
Yep. Well, and I think too, like we had said, in our current climate, so much is built on the online presence. So much is built on, whether people can become familiar with you and your church before they ever walk through your doors.
Mhm.
Because there's going to come a point, we're all planning, there's going to come a point where we're able to open the doors, no restrictions, nothing, and people will be able to come as freely as possible. And the churches that have invested and been patient and been strategic and really engage people effectively online, whether it's through social media or online services or whatever it is, the ones who have done that are going to see huge increases walking through the door when the doors open fully.
Mhm.
Because even now, like you guys said, you have your doors open, but there's still people that are saying, I want to come, but I'm just not going to.
Mhm.
There's going to come a day where everybody can come who's chosen to. And whether your online presence has been solid or not is going to determine what that looks like. And so, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be any of that. It really just comes down to, are you serving through your online content? And then are you engaging people when they engage with you?
Mhm.
And then are you giving them an experience that they can remember and talk about and come back for more once they walk through your doors in whatever capacity that looks like? And I think the more of us that can really dig in and figure this out, it's hard for some of us. For me, it's not natural. It's not something that I even enjoy, but it's something that I have to learn in order to engage people for the cause of Christ. And so if we can do that, then it'll all be worth it. So,
Mhm.
well, I think that's it for this first inaugural episode of Ministry Hackers. Again, if you want to join the Ministry Hackers community, you can do that at ministryhackers.com, or you can find us on Facebook. We would love to have you. Thank you all for listening. We believe in what you're doing. We believe in your efforts and everything you're doing for the cause of Christ. So don't stop. Don't get discouraged. Don't lose heart. Keep pressing forward, and we'll see you in the next episode.